Right, hi Year 12s. Hope you're all okay and have been coping all right with this work as well as the ongoing uncertainties about the coronavirus. So, I'm afraid I haven't had a chance to use Teams with you yet, partly because I'm waiting for permission to do so, but also I need to do some more work on it. So I'm thinking about sort of postponing that till after Easter. So I've just made a short video just to kind of go over some of the ideas of Augustine and also a little bit on Irenaeus. So, answer this question. I'm sure you're all happy with this. It's a perfect world, all right? That it is good in every entirety. There is no evil. There's no suffering in the world at the beginning of creation. And as I'm sure you've realised, everything is good in its own way. So, as a stone is good as a stone, a human is good as a human. They're all different to each other, but everything is good in itself. So what we end up with is a creation that has a scale of goodness in it. Okay, some things have more capability, therefore are better than others in that sense, have more goodness. But everything is good, and so we have a diversity of goodness, and that is a reflection of God's creation. Okay, so how does Augustine define evil? Well, again, I'm sure you're happy with this. Evil is not a substance, not a thing. It is an absence of goodness. Okay. It is privatio boni, the absence of good, and it's an absence of things that we should have. Okay, so obviously I can't fly, but that's not in a sense an absence of something I should have, but the ability to walk and the ability to make good decisions, make careful decisions, is something that you would expect of me as a person. All right, that's what he's talking about. So evil is where there's an absence of this idea of goodness. Right. Okay. So evil is always parasitic, if you like, or like a parasite on a pre-existing form of good, on a perfect creation. Right? So like illness is the absence of health. Health is the pre-existing goodness, perfection. Illness is a parasite on that, and that's how he sees evil. Okay, so how does this all enter into the world? Well, that is a very difficult question, actually, and there's sort of, I think, some sort of inconsistencies in what Augustine says. But fundamentally, moral evil enters through human action, through the misuse of free will. And this starts with Adam and Eve, the first humans who disobey God. But they follow in the steps, of course, of the fall of the angels led by Satan or Lucifer. So everything is perfect, but then Augustine talks about how sort of Lucifer is given less grace to be good, and somehow through pride, really wanting to be like God, wanting to be autonomous, not depend on God, tries to be like God and is cast out from the heavens, and then of course tempts Eve through the form of the serpent to do the same. This act of disobedience is a form of pride. And what Augustine believed was at creation everything was in harmony, and that included us as humans. That within ourselves, our bodies, human will, that is what makes the decisions, what makes us act, and our reason all exist in a kind of harmony. But then, because of this kind of act of pride, it kind of falls into disharmony and causes then evil to enter into the world and suffering. All right, and he thinks that natural evil follows on from moral evil. So our human actions that have caused this of disobedience, or Adam and Eve's, then result in some sort of disharmony in the natural world. Okay. So this is where it arises from. But of course, at the heart of Augustine's ideas is free will, and this idea that humans are created with freedom, and this is a positive quality to have, because what he thinks is that if ultimately we are going to have and choose a genuine relationship with God, then we have to make that choice ourselves. It can't be something forced upon us, like we exist like kind of robots already determined and worshipping God. It has to be that relationship with God is going to be genuine. We have to choose it ourselves. Okay, and that's why we need free will. But obviously, there is this potential for misuse of this free will, and this is what happened with Adam and Eve. So he sees the fall as very much as a significant moment in human history. It's a literal event for Augustine when humans turned away from God. Disharmony comes into the world, and this affects all of us. We're all born with a tendency to sin, a tendency where there is a disharmony in all of us to be disobedient. Okay, and of course he knows and talks about this as the original sin, which I'm sure you'll remember from GCSE. We'll come back to this. Okay, so it's a soul-deciding theodicy because ultimately we have a choice. Following in the footsteps of Adam and Eve, we have a choice whether or not to follow God. Okay, so that's a kind of quick summary of those questions. I'm sure you've got that and you're happy with that. Just wanted to clarify that with you. Okay, I'm not going to deal with the objections to Augustine's theodicy today. I hope you've had a look at those questions earlier this week. What I want to do is just focus on Irenaeus and those three quotations. I'll come back to the criticisms of Augustine after Easter, and we'll do that together, hopefully in the team's exercise. So, the first image. Okay, what is going on here in this analogy? The idea, of course, is a bit like God is like a potter, and we are like the clay, and we are being moulded by God. So it's making the point that we are created by God, we're dependent on God for our existence. But it's this idea that we are created. Unlike Augustine, we're not perfect. We are creation is an ongoing thing, and we are moving towards some sort of perfection, like a finished article made by a potter. We are just at the early stages of the mold of the clay being molded. And we are totally dependent on God for moving towards perfection. Okay, we cannot achieve it on our own, but we do need to keep ourselves kind of moist like clay, it says. So we have to kind of play a role there in terms of decisions we make, the way we act. But ultimately, we depend very much on God for that, and of course Jesus in terms of his actions and how we respond and follow to Jesus. Okay, so hopefully you've got this idea. For Irenaeus, it's different. We're not created perfect. We're created in the image of God with potential to grow into the likeness of God. Okay, right. Quote 2 was really the analogy about. Oh, sorry, missed that. Quote 2 is about the mother with the baby and how she cannot give the baby adult food, proper food in a sense. It has to start with breast milk or milk because the baby's not ready for that yet. Okay, and in the same way, I think what he's trying to get at is this idea that we are in a sort of childlike state, immature state. We are not yet ready in terms of the knowledge of good and evil. We're not ready for that yet. We're not ready to handle that wisdom and responsibility that comes with it. That's kind of in a way why we're forbidden from taking the fruit from the tree. We need to grow. We need to develop first and mature before we can handle that. So I think this is what he's trying to get at, and also the sense that actually we're going to have to continue to grow after death as well, and move to the likeness of God. It's really going to be something we achieve after death, and that ties in with quotation 3, which is talking really about sort of the moment after death. I think at the heart of Irenaeus' thinking is this idea that the soul making is something that continues after death. It's not something we can achieve. Can't achieve the likeness of God in this world. People sadly die prematurely. People suffer greatly. Because of the world we live in, it's very difficult to achieve this. So there has to be some continuation after death. Okay. So there will be continual growth, but ultimately there is for those who kind of obey God and who kind of achieve that likeness of God, they will then be with God in some kind of perfect state. They'll achieve their likeness in a kind of heaven, I guess. But he does think, actually, ultimately, there is an eternal fire for those who reject God. There has to be some kind of outcome for those who don't obey God, some end result. And he talks about eternal fire. Now, the problem with this is that, according to the whole theodicy, evil exists to produce good. Evil is in the world to help us grow, okay, as you may have found out with your ideas about Irenaeus, okay, that we're not born into a perfect world, we're born into a world where there are hurdles, difficulties, challenges, because by that gives us genuine free will to grow and develop into the likeness of God. It's a bit like a parent putting their child, giving their child more responsibility, putting them out into the adult world to face difficulties, to potentially make mistakes, to maybe get a bit hurt, but actually ultimately to grow as a person. And that's kind of how Irenaeus sees it. So if evil is there ultimately as a kind of instrumental good, it's there for us to grow towards the likeness of God. The problem is with the idea of eternal fire, is or if you like hell, is that doesn't fit into that picture. If evil exists to produce good, then we cannot explain hell, because hell doesn't achieve any good. Once you're there, it is just eternal pain and punishment. It doesn't do any good. So this doesn't fit comfortably with the rest of the idea of Irenaeus. Okay, and as you will probably see in this lesson, you will find out how Hick tries to resolve that by talking about universal salvation. Okay, so that just takes you through some of those questions. I haven't gone through Irenaeus in complete detail, but I hope you've made some decent notes on that. And what we'll do next is we'll collate that table. I'll go through that with you together, and just answer any questions you have about the two theodicies, and then we will start to kind of look particularly in detail at the criticisms of these. Okay, and whether either of them is more persuasive. Okay, thanks for all you're doing, and well done, folks. Hope to be in touch again soon. Bye now.